Elena Voss could smell fear in the air, and some of it was her own. The forest was dark and cold, and the wind moved through the trees like a warning. Her wrists were tied with rough rope, and her legs shook with every step her father forced her to take. She did not understand, not fully, why the man who raised her was walking beside armed strangers, instead of standing in front of her to protect her. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Father, tell me this is not what I think it is." Edmund Voss did not look at her. His jaw was tight, and his eyes stayed fixed on the path ahead, as if looking at his daughter would break something inside him that he had already decided to ignore. "It has to be done, Elena," he said quietly. "There is no other way." The men walking with them were not pack members. Elena could tell by their scent, sharp and wild, unlike the calm, familiar presence of her own pack. These were rogue wolves, wanderers, who followed no laws and answered to no alpha. Their leader walked a few steps ahead, tall and scarred, with eyes that studied Elena the way a hunter studies a trapped animal. His name, she would later learn, was Draven. "You said she would not fight," Draven said without turning around. "Make sure that stays true." Elena's mind raced. Bait. That was the word her father's men had whispered when they thought she was asleep the night before. She had heard it clearly through the thin wall of her bedroom. Bait for the rogues. A trade to save the pack from a debt that had grown too large to pay in coin. She had not wanted to believe it. She had told herself she misheard, that her father, whatever his faults, would never do something so cruel. But here she was, walking through the forest with her wrists bound, proof that she had not misheard anything at all. "Why me?" she asked, and this time her voice was steadier, sharper. "Lily is your daughter too. Why not her?" Her father's shoulders tensed. "Lily is young. She has years ahead of her. You understand things. You always have. I need you to understand this too." "I understand that you are selling me," Elena said. "There is nothing else to understand." He said nothing more. The silence between them was heavier than any words could have been. They reached a clearing at the edge of pack territory, where old stones marked the border between what was safe and what was not. Elena had played near these stones as a child, back when the forest still felt like home, instead of a trap closing around her. Now the trees looked like teeth, and the shadows looked like open mouths waiting to swallow her whole. Draven stopped walking and turned to face her father. "The payment first." Edmund reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, sealed with wax. Elena recognized it as a debt release, the kind pack leaders used to settle disputes between territories. Whatever her father owed, whoever he owed it to, this piece of paper was supposed to make it disappear, in exchange for her. Draven took the paper, examined the seal, and nodded once. "Good, she is yours no longer." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear exactly, though fear was there too. It was closer to grief. The realization that the man who had raised her, fed her, taught her to walk and talk and survive, could look at this exchange and feel nothing but relief. "Father," she said, one last time, her voice barely above a whisper, "please." Edmund finally turned to look at her, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or shame. But it passed as quickly as it came, and he turned away without another word, walking back toward the packlands, back toward safety, leaving his daughter behind in a clearing full of strangers who owed her nothing. The rogues closed in around her the moment her father disappeared from sight. "Well," Draven said, circling her slowly, "aren't you a pretty little offering?" Elena's heart pounded so hard she thought the sound alone might give away how terrified she truly was. She forced herself to stand straight, to lift her chin, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "What do you want with me?" she asked. Draven smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "You are not the prize, sweet girl. You are the trap. There is a king who has been hunting my people for weeks now, burning our camps, killing our brothers. We heard he has a soft spot for lost, pretty things. We heard he cannot resist rescuing someone in danger." Elena's stomach twisted. "You are using me to lure someone here." "Clever girl," Draven said, "and when he comes to save you, we will be ready for him." The other rogues laughed, low and cruel sounds that echoed through the trees. Elena's mind spun, trying to find some way out, some plan, anything at all. But her hands were bound, and she was surrounded, and there was nowhere to run even if she tried. One of the rogues, a broad man with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped closer and reached toward her face. Elena flinched back, but there was nowhere to go. His fingers were inches from her skin when a sound tore through the forest, so loud and so deep that the ground itself seemed to tremble. It was a growl, but it was unlike anything Elena had ever heard. It did not sound like an animal. It sounded like power itself, ancient and absolute, rolling through the trees and freezing every living thing in its path. The rogue who had reached for her stopped moving entirely, his hand still hovering in the air. The laughter died. The birds that had been calling in the branches above went silent. Even the wind seemed to still. Draven's confident expression cracked for the first time. That cannot be him. Not yet. We were not ready. Ready or not, said a voice from the shadows, calm and cold as winter. You should not have come here. Elena turned toward the sound, and what she saw took the breath from her lungs entirely. A man stepped out from between the trees, tall and powerful, with golden eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim forest light. He wore no crown, no obvious mark of royalty, and yet everything about him radiated command. From the way he moved, to the way the very air around him seemed to bend to his presence. Elena had heard stories about him, whispered around fires and passed between travelers. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Ronan Ashford. A ruler so powerful that entire packs bowed the moment his name was spoken. She had never believed the stories could be true. Looking at him now, she understood that the stories had not come close to capturing what he truly was. Draven took a step back, his bravado faltering. King Ronan, we did not expect you to come alone. You did not expect me to come at all, Ronan said. You thought a frightened girl would be enough to draw me into a trap you could actually win. His golden eyes moved toward Elena for just a moment, and something shifted in his expression, something quick and startled, as if he had not expected to feel whatever it was he felt when he looked at her. But he did not let it show for long. His attention snapped back to Draven and the rogues surrounding him, and the warmth in his eyes turned to something far colder. Release her, Ronan said, and I will consider letting the rest of you leave this forest alive. Draven's men exchanged uncertain glances. Elena could see the fear spreading among them. The same fear that had gripped the forest the moment Ronan's growl had echoed through the trees. But Draven himself did not back down. You are one man, Draven said. We are many. I have never needed many, Ronan replied, to deal with cowards who use innocent people as tools. The words had barely left his mouth when he moved, faster than Elena's eyes could follow. One moment he was standing calmly at the edge of the clearing, and the next he was among the rogues, and the forest was filled with the sounds of a fight that ended almost as quickly as it began. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, unable to watch, her whole body shaking as the clearing echoed with shouts and snarls and the heavy thud of bodies hitting the ground. When she finally opened her eyes again, the rogues who had surrounded her only moments before were scattered across the clearing, groaning and defeated, unable to stand. Draven himself knelt on the ground, held down by a force Elena could not fully understand, his earlier confidence completely gone. You are fortunate, Ronan said to him, his voice low and dangerous, that I have somewhere else I need to be. He released Draven, who scrambled backward before fleeing into the trees with whatever remained of his men, leaving behind only silence and the sound of Elena's own unsteady breathing. Ronan turned to face her fully for the first time, and Elena found herself unable to look away from him. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming, but there was something else there too, something gentler beneath the raw power radiating off him. He walked toward her slowly, as if he understood how frightened she was and did not want to add to it. When he reached her, he did not touch her right away. Instead, he simply looked at her, his golden eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her heart beat even faster, though this time it was not entirely from fear. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice softer now than it had been with the rogues. Elena shook her head, though her wrists still ached from the rope. No, not hurt, just scared. Ronan's jaw tightened slightly, as if the word scared bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He reached out carefully and untied the rope around her wrists, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he worked the knots loose. You are safe now, he said. No one here will hurt you. How can I trust that? Elena asked, rubbing her freed wrists. I do not even know you." Something flickered across Ronan's face, and for a brief moment, Elena thought she saw something like recognition in his eyes, as if seeing her had answered a question he had been asking his whole life without realizing it. But he did not explain it, not yet. Instead, he simply nodded, accepting her doubt without argument. "You do not have to trust me," he said. "Not yet. But I am not going to leave you alone in this forest, not after what almost happened to you." Elena looked around at the clearing, at the fallen men still groaning on the ground, at the trees that had felt like a trap only minutes ago. Her father was gone. Her home, if it could even be called that anymore, was no longer safe for her to return to. She had nowhere else to go. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ronan studied her for a long moment before answering. "Now you come with me. My territory is close, and there you will be protected, whether you choose to trust me or not." Elena hesitated. Everything about this moment felt impossible. A stranger appearing out of nowhere to save her from a fate she had already accepted, offering her shelter with nothing asked in return. Life had taught her that nothing came without a price, that even the people who claimed to love her could sell her away without hesitation. Why would a king, a stranger with more power than she could fully understand, be any different? But she also had no other choice. The forest around her was full of dangers she could not face alone, and the only person offering her a way forward was the very man who had just saved her life. "All right," she said finally, her voice small but steady. "I will come with you." Something in Ronan's expression eased, though he tried not to let it show too much. He gestured for her to walk beside him, and together they left the clearing, leaving behind the stones that marked the border of the only home Elena had ever known. As they walked deeper into unfamiliar territory, Elena stole glances at the man beside her, trying to understand what it was about him that made the fear inside her feel just a little bit smaller. She did not know yet that the pull she felt toward him was not simple relief or gratitude. She did not know that somewhere deep inside her, a part of her recognized him in a way she could not yet explain. She only knew that for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not feel entirely alone. Behind them, the forest grew quiet again. The danger passed for now, though Elena could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger than she understood. The rogues who had fled would not simply disappear. Her father's betrayal would not simply be forgotten. And the strange, powerful pull she felt toward the Alpha King walking silently beside her was not something she could ignore for long. But for now, she walked forward, one careful step at a time, toward a future she could not yet see, guided by a stranger whose golden eyes had already begun to change everything she thought she knew about her own life. The path curved upward through the trees, climbing higher, until the forest began to thin and the first signs of civilization appeared in the distance, torches glowing faintly against the darkening sky. Elena realized they were approaching something large, something important, and her nervousness returned in full force. "Is that your home?" she asked. "It is," Ronan said. "The Ashford stronghold. You will be safe within its walls." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look, dressed in torn, dirty clothes after everything she had been through. "Everyone there is going to wonder who I am and why I am with you." "Let them wonder," Ronan said simply. "You owe no one an explanation, least of all people who have never had to fight for their own survival." There was something in the way he said it, a quiet understanding, that made Elena look at him more closely. Perhaps this powerful king understood more about hardship than his title suggested. Perhaps there was more to him than the stories had ever captured. They continued walking in silence, the stronghold growing larger and more impressive with every step, and Elena felt the weight of everything that had happened that day finally begin to settle over her. Exhaustion mixing with disbelief, mixing with a strange, cautious hope. She had been sold as bait, betrayed by her own family, and saved by a king whose golden eyes seemed to see straight through her. Whatever came next, she knew her life would never be the same again. The gates of the Ashford stronghold rose higher than any wall Elena had ever seen, built from pale stone that seemed to glow faintly under the torchlight. Guards stood at attention along the top, their eyes sweeping the surroundings with practiced alertness, and when they spotted Ronan approaching, they straightened even further, bowing their heads in quick, respectful acknowledgement. "King Ronan!" one of them called out. "We were not expecting you back so soon." "Plans changed," Ronan replied simply. offering no further explanation as he led Elena through the gates. Elena felt dozens of eyes turn toward her the moment she stepped inside. Servants paused in their tasks. Guards exchanged curious glances. A stronghold this large clearly did not often see strangers walking beside its king, and Elena, still dressed in torn clothing, with dirt smudged across her arms, was impossible not to notice. She kept her chin lifted, refusing to let the stairs make her feel smaller than she already did. She had survived being sold by her own father. She could survive a few curious looks. Ronan noticed the attention too, and something in his expression hardened slightly, as if daring anyone to say something out of line. No one did. "This way," he said, guiding her through a wide courtyard and toward the main doors of the stronghold. "I will have rooms prepared for you." "You do not need to trouble yourself," Elena said quickly. "A small room is fine. I do not want to be a burden." Ronan stopped walking and turned to look at her, his golden eyes unreadable. "You are not a burden. You were nearly hurt today because of choices that had nothing to do with you. The least I can offer is comfort and safety." Elena did not know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and followed him inside. The interior of the stronghold was even more impressive than the outside had suggested. Tall ceilings and polished floors, tapestries depicting battles and victories long past, the quiet hum of a place that had stood strong for generations. Elena felt entirely out of place, a girl from a minor pack now standing inside the home of the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. A young woman approached them, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her expression curious but kind. "Ronan, who is this?" "Elena," Ronan said. "She will be staying with us for a while. Elena, this is Mira. Her brother Garrett is my beta. She will help you get settled." Mira smiled warmly at Elena, and for the first time since the forest, Elena felt a small flicker of ease settle into her chest. "It is nice to meet you, Elena. Come, let us find you something more comfortable to wear, and then some food. You look like you have had quite a day." Elena glanced at Ronan, unsure whether to follow, and he gave a small nod of encouragement. "Go with Mira. I have matters to attend to, but I will check on you soon." As Mira led her away, Elena could not stop herself from glancing back once. Ronan was still standing where she had left him, watching her go, his expression unreadable, but his eyes fixed intently on her retreating figure. She quickly looked away, her cheeks warming for reasons she did not fully understand. Mira brought her to a room far grander than anything Elena had ever slept in, with a large bed, soft blankets, and a window overlooking the courtyard below. A tub of warm water had already been prepared, steam rising gently into the cool evening air. "This is too much," Elena said, staring around the room in disbelief. "Nonsense," Mira said, waving a hand. "Ronan does not offer this kind of hospitality often. You must have made quite an impression on him." Elena did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing at all. After she had washed away the dirt and exhaustion of the day, and changed into simple, clean clothing that Mira provided, Elena finally allowed herself to sit on the edge of the bed and process everything that had happened. Her father's betrayal, the rogues, the terrifying, overwhelming presence of King Ronan Ashford appearing out of nowhere to save her life. She should have felt only relief. Instead, she felt something more complicated. A strange awareness of the king that she could not fully explain. A pull she had felt the moment his golden eyes first met hers in that clearing. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Ronan standing there, having changed out of his fighting clothes into something simpler, though he still carried himself with the same commanding presence. "May I come in?" he asked. Elena stepped aside to let him enter, suddenly nervous in a way she had not expected. "You did not have to check on me tonight. I am fine." "I wanted to," Ronan said simply. He glanced around the room before his eyes settled back on her. "How are you feeling, truly?" Elena considered lying, telling him she was fine, that everything was fine, but something about the sincerity in his voice made her want to be honest instead. Confused, scared, grateful, all at once, somehow. Ronan nodded slowly, as if her answer did not surprise him. "That makes sense, given everything that happened today." "Why did you save me?" Elena asked, the question she had been holding back since the forest finally spilling out. "You did not know me. I was nothing to you." Ronan was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes studying her carefully, as if weighing how much to say. I had been tracking that rogue faction for weeks. They attacked one of my border villages, hurt people who had done nothing to deserve it. When I realized they were using an innocent person as bait, I could not simply walk away. That is not the only reason, Elena said quietly, watching his face. Is it? Something flickered in his expression, and for a moment, Elena thought he might actually tell her the truth, whatever it was. But he only offered a small, careful smile instead. There will be time for more answers later. For now, you should rest. You have been through enough for one day. Elena wanted to press further, but exhaustion was beginning to win over curiosity, and she nodded instead. All right, thank you, Ronan, for everything. You are welcome, Elena, he said, and there was something warm in the way he said her name, something that made her chest tighten in a way she did not fully understand. He left the room quietly, and Elena climbed into the soft bed, staring up at the ceiling as her thoughts spun in circles. She should have felt only fear and uncertainty about her future in this unfamiliar place. Instead, sleep found her quickly, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, her dreams were not filled with worry. The next morning, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the window, and the sound of the stronghold coming to life below. She dressed in the clothing Mira had left for her, and made her way downstairs, unsure of where to go, but curious to explore her new, temporary home. She found Mira in a large dining hall, already seated with a plate of food in front of her. Good morning, Mira said cheerfully, gesturing for Elena to join her. I hope you slept well. Better than I expected, Elena admitted, sitting down across from her. As they ate, Mira chatted easily about life within the stronghold, about her brother Garrett, and his duties as Beta, about the various members of court Elena would likely encounter during her stay. Elena listened carefully, grateful for the information, but also grateful for the simple, easy company, after such a difficult day before. Can I ask you something? Elena said eventually, lowering her voice slightly. Is it normal for Ronan to bring strangers here and offer them rooms like this? Mira's expression shifted, something thoughtful crossing her face. No, it is not normal at all. Ronan does not trust easily, and he certainly does not open his home to people he just met. Whatever happened between you two yesterday, it clearly mattered to him. Elena did not know how to respond to that, so she simply focused on her food, her mind spinning once again, with questions she did not yet have answers to. Later that day, as Elena wandered through the gardens behind the stronghold, trying to clear her head, she spotted Ronan speaking with a group of guards near the training grounds. He caught sight of her and excused himself, walking over with the same quiet confidence that seemed to follow him everywhere. Enjoying the gardens? He asked. They are beautiful, Elena said honestly, very different from anything back home. A shadow crossed Ronan's face at the mention of her home, and Elena wondered if he was thinking about her father, about the betrayal that had brought her here in the first place. You do not have to think about that place anymore, he said. You are safe here, for as long as you need. And after that? Elena asked. What happens when I no longer need your protection? Ronan was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes studying her, with an intensity that made her breath catch slightly. We will figure that out when the time comes. For now, focus on healing. That is enough. Elena nodded, though questions still lingered in the back of her mind. Something about the way Ronan looked at her felt different from simple hospitality, different from the protective instincts of a king rescuing an innocent stranger. There was a pull between them that she could not fully explain, an awareness that seemed to grow stronger every time they were near each other. She did not know yet what that pull meant, but she was beginning to suspect that her arrival at the Ashford stronghold was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would change her life in ways she could not yet imagine. Days passed inside the Ashford stronghold, and slowly, carefully, Elena began to find a rhythm within its walls. She helped Mira with small tasks in the mornings, walked through the gardens in the afternoons, and in the evenings, more often than not, found herself sharing quiet conversations with Ronan, whose visits had become a steady, comforting presence in her new life. But not everyone within the stronghold welcomed her arrival with the same warmth. Elena first noticed the whispers during a meal in the Great Hall, where members of the court gathered to eat and discuss matters of the kingdom. She had grown used to curious glances by now, but these were sharper, colder, filled with something closer to suspicion than curiosity. Pay them no attention, Mira said quietly, noticing Elena's discomfort. They are simply not used to seeing anyone new so close to Ronan. Close to him? Elena repeated. I am only a guest. Mira gave her a knowing look but said nothing further, and Elena tried to push the strange comment from her mind as she finished her meal. Later that evening, as she walked through one of the quieter hallways of the stronghold, a voice stopped her in her tracks. You must be the girl everyone is talking about. Elena turned to find a woman standing behind her, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes and an even sharper smile. Something about her presence felt cold, calculated, entirely unlike the warmth Elena had grown used to from Mira and the other members of the household staff. I am Elena, she said carefully. I do not believe we have met. Priscilla, the woman replied. I have known Ronan for many years, longer than you, certainly. Her eyes swept over Elena with obvious judgment. It is curious, is it not, how quickly you managed to secure his attention. A stranger from nowhere, suddenly given rooms in his own home. Elena felt her spine straighten, refusing to let the woman's tone intimidate her. I did not secure anything. King Ronan saved my life. Offering me shelter afterward was his choice, not mine. Of course, Priscilla said, though her smile did not reach her eyes. Just be careful, dear. Men like Ronan grow tired of new distractions quickly. I would hate for you to be disappointed when he does. She walked away before Elena could respond, leaving behind a cold, uncomfortable feeling that settled deep in Elena's chest. She told herself the woman's words meant nothing, that jealousy alone could not undo everything she had begun to feel safe within these walls. But the doubt lingered anyway, quiet and persistent. That night, Elena could not sleep. She sat by her window, staring out at the moonlit courtyard below, her mind cycling through everything that had happened since the moment her father led her into the forest. She had escaped one kind of danger, only to find herself now questioning her place in an entirely new world, uncertain of where she truly belonged. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Ronan standing there, his expression concerned. I saw your light was still on, he said. Is everything all right? Elena hesitated, unsure whether to share what was bothering her, but something about his steady, genuine concern made her want to be honest. I met someone earlier. Priscilla. Ronan's expression shifted immediately, something tense crossing his features. What did she say to you? That I should be careful, Elena said quietly. That men like you grow tired of new distractions. A muscle in Ronan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Elena saw a flash of real anger in his golden eyes, quickly controlled but unmistakable. Priscilla does not speak for me, and she certainly does not know what she is talking about. Then what is the truth? Elena asked, finally allowing the question she had been holding back to surface fully. Why does everyone react so strangely around us? Why did you really save me that day, Ronan? I need to understand. Ronan was quiet for a long moment, and Elena watched as something like a decision settled over his features. Come, sit with me. It is time I explained everything. They sat together near the window, the moonlight casting a soft glow across the room, and Ronan finally began to speak, his voice steady but careful, as if choosing each word with great precision. In our world, wolves are sometimes destined to find a mate, a bond stronger than any other connection, formed not by choice, but by fate itself. It is rare. Many wolves live their entire lives without ever finding theirs. He paused, his golden eyes meeting hers directly. The moment I saw you in that clearing, Elena, I recognized something in you, a pull, a certainty I had never felt before with anyone else. Elena's heart pounded as understanding slowly dawned. You are saying that I am my fated mate, Ronan finished quietly. Yes. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Elena could not fully process. Part of her had suspected something like this, some explanation for the strange, undeniable pull she had felt toward him from the very beginning. But hearing it confirmed so plainly left her breathless. Why did you not tell me sooner? She asked. Because I did not want to frighten you, Ronan said honestly. You had just been betrayed by your own family, sold away like an object with no say in your own fate. I did not want you to feel forced into anything, especially not something as significant as this. Elena appreciated his honesty, But the revelation still left her mind spinning with conflicting emotions. A part of her felt drawn to him undeniably, comforted by his presence in a way she could not fully explain through logic alone. But another part of her, the part shaped by years of being used and discarded by people who claimed to care for her, recoiled instinctively at the idea of belonging to anyone, even someone as gentle and protective as Ronan had proven to be. "I do not know how to feel about this," she admitted quietly. "I have spent my whole life being someone else's decision, my father's daughter, obligated to obey, bait, sold away to settle a debt. Now you are telling me fate itself has decided who I belong to as well." Ronan's expression softened with understanding. "You misunderstand, Elena. The bond does not decide anything for you. It simply exists, a possibility, a connection. What you choose to do with it, whether you choose to accept it at all, that remains entirely yours to decide. I will never force this on you." "You promise?" Elena asked, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. "I promise," Ronan said firmly. "You have had enough decisions made for you already. This one, more than any other, needs to be yours alone." Something in Elena's chest loosened slightly at his words, a small measure of trust settling into place despite everything. She was still uncertain, still cautious after everything her family had put her through, but Ronan's patience, his willingness to let her choose rather than demand her acceptance, meant more to her than she knew how to express. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being honest with me, and for understanding." Ronan reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently took her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest, a quiet, undeniable sense of rightness that startled her with its intensity. "Take whatever time you need," Ronan said softly. "I am not going anywhere." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while longer, the weight of the revelation settling between them, not as a burden but as something gentler, something that felt, despite everything, like the beginning of hope rather than another obligation forced upon her. When Ronan finally left her room that night, Elena remained by the window for a long time, staring out at the moonlit courtyard, her mind replaying everything he had told her. Fated mate. The words felt enormous, life-changing, and yet Ronan's promise to let her choose freely eased some of the fear that came with them. For the first time since her father had led her into that forest, Elena allowed herself to imagine a future that was entirely her own to shape, one where the choices belonged to her alone, guided not by obligation or fear, but by whatever she genuinely wanted for herself. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. The following days brought a subtle shift in how Elena moved through the stronghold. Knowing the truth about the bond between them changed nothing outwardly. Ronan kept his promise and never pressured her, but internally, Elena found herself watching him more closely, noticing small things she had overlooked before. The way his eyes softened whenever she entered a room, the way he seemed to find reasons to be near her throughout the day, always careful, always respectful, but present nonetheless. She also noticed Priscilla's continued cold glances from across the great hall, though the woman never approached her directly again. Elena chose not to let the tension bother her, focusing instead on rebuilding her sense of self in this strange new world she now called home. One afternoon, as she walked through the training grounds watching the guards practice their combat skills, Garrett, Ronan's beta and Mira's older brother, approached her with a curious expression. "You have made quite an impression on our king," he said, watching the training alongside her. "I have known Ronan for years. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Is that meant to reassure me?" Elena asked, only half joking. Garrett chuckled. It is meant to tell you that whatever doubts you carry, they are not baseless, but they are also not something you need to face alone. Ronan is a good man, even if his position sometimes makes him seem otherwise. He will not hurt you." Elena appreciated the sentiment, though she remained quietly cautious. Trust was not something she gave easily anymore. Not after everything her own family had done, but little by little, surrounded by people who seemed genuinely invested in her well-being, that caution began to soften, replaced slowly by something that almost resembled belonging. She did not know yet how quickly that fragile sense of safety would be tested again, or how soon the past she thought she had left behind would come searching for her once more. News traveled fast within the Ashford territory, and word of Elena's presence at the stronghold eventually reached places she never expected it to. She should have known her father would hear of it eventually. She did not expect him to act on that knowledge so quickly. It was a quiet morning when one of the guards approached her in the garden, his expression uneasy. "Miss Elena, there is a man at the gates asking to see you. He says he is your father." Elena's stomach dropped. She had not thought about Edmund Voss since the day he walked away from her in that clearing, had not allowed herself to dwell on the betrayal for fear of what it might do to the fragile peace she had begun building for herself. Now, hearing that he stood just beyond the stronghold walls, all of that carefully constructed calm threatened to crumble. "Does King Ronan know?" she asked. "He has been informed," the guard said. "He is on his way now." Elena took a steadying breath and made her way toward the front gates, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger, fear, and something uncomfortably close to hope, the small, foolish part of her that still wondered if her father had come to apologize, to explain himself, to make things right. She found Ronan already waiting near the gates when she arrived, his expression carefully neutral, though Elena could sense the tension radiating from him. Beyond the gates stood Edmund Voss, looking smaller and more nervous than Elena remembered, his eyes darting between his daughter and the powerful king standing protectively beside her. "Elena," Edmund said, his voice hesitant, "I am glad to see you are well." "Are you?" Elena said flatly, crossing her arms. "That is surprising, given you sold me to strangers in a forest." Edmund flinched at her words, glancing nervously at Ronan before continuing. "I know I have wronged you. I have come to make amends." "Have you?" Elena said, unconvinced. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Her father hesitated, and in that hesitation, Elena saw the truth before he even spoke it aloud. "I have heard about your position here, within the Ashford court. I thought, perhaps, given your closeness to the king, you might speak on my behalf. There have been rumors, accusations against me regarding the debts I owed. If you could simply explain to the court that the circumstances were complicated, that I acted out of desperation rather than cruelty." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest as understanding dawned. He had not come to apologize at all. He had come to use her again, this time as a tool to protect his own reputation, rather than to pay off a debt. "You want me to lie for you," she said quietly, "after everything you did." "I am not asking you to lie," Edmund said quickly, "simply to offer context, to soften how the situation is perceived." Beside her, Elena felt Ronan's entire body tense, a low, dangerous energy radiating from him that made even the guards nearby shift uncomfortably. "You have some nerve," Ronan said, his voice deceptively calm, though the fury beneath it was unmistakable. "Coming here, asking your daughter for favors, after selling her like property, to men who would have hurt her." "This is between me and my daughter," Edmund said, though his voice wavered slightly under the weight of Ronan's glare. "It stopped being only between you and her, the moment you handed her over to rogues," Ronan said. "I should have you removed from these lands entirely." "Wait," Elena said, placing a hand gently on Ronan's arm. Despite everything, despite her own anger, she needed to face her father herself, needed to say the things she had been carrying since that day in the forest, without anyone else speaking for her. "Let me handle this." Ronan looked at her for a long moment before nodding slowly, stepping back just enough to give her the space to speak for herself, though he remained close, ready to intervene if needed. Elena turned back to her father, her chin lifted, her voice steady despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. "You raised me to believe that family meant something, that we protected each other no matter what. And then, the moment it became convenient, you sold me away without a second thought. You did not come here today to apologize. You came here because you need something from me, just like you always have." "Elena, please," Edmund said, his voice cracking slightly. "I made a terrible mistake. I know that, but I am still your father." "A father protects his children," Elena said, her voice finally breaking with the weight of everything she had held back since that day. "A father does not trade them away to save himself. You lost the right to call yourself that, the moment you walked away from me in that forest." Silence fell over the gates, heavy and absolute. Edmund's face crumbled, whatever hope he had carried into this meeting clearly extinguished by his daughter's words. "I will not help you," Elena continued, her voice steadier now. Whatever consequences you face, because of your own choices, you will face them alone, the same way you left me to face mine. She turned away from her father then, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing how much the conversation had cost her emotionally. Ronan stepped forward immediately, positioning himself protectively between Elena and the gates. "You have your answer," Ronan said to Edmund. "I suggest you leave before I decide your presence here is no longer welcome at all." Edmund lingered for a moment longer, his expression a mixture of shame and desperation, before finally turning and walking away, disappearing back down the road he had come from. Elena watched him go, feeling an unexpected mixture of relief and grief settle over her. Grief for the father she had wanted him to be, rather than the one he actually was. Once he was gone, Ronan turned to her, his expression soft with concern. "Are you all right?" Elena let out a shaky breath, some of the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "I think so. It felt good, actually, saying those things to him. I have wanted to for a long time." "You handled that with more strength than most people could manage," Ronan said, genuine admiration evident in his voice. "I am proud of you." The words settled warmly in Elena's chest, unfamiliar but welcome. She could not remember the last time anyone had told her they were proud of her, and hearing it from Ronan, after everything they had been through together, meant more than she knew how to express. "Thank you for letting me handle it myself," she said. "I needed that." "I could see that," Ronan said. "You do not need me to fight every battle for you, Elena. Just the ones you cannot face alone." They walked back into the stronghold together, and though the encounter with her father had left Elena emotionally drained, she also felt something new settling into place, a quiet sense of closure, regarding a chapter of her life she had never fully allowed herself to process. Over the following days, word of the confrontation spread quietly through the court, and Elena noticed a subtle shift in how people regarded her. The suspicious glances softened, replaced by something closer to respect. Even Priscilla, though still cold, seemed less openly hostile, as if the strength Elena had shown at the gates had earned her a measure of grudging acknowledgement. Mira found her in the garden that evening, settling down beside her with a knowing smile. "I heard about what happened with your father. That took real courage." "It did not feel like courage in the moment," Elena admitted. "It felt like finally saying everything I had been holding inside for far too long." "Sometimes that is exactly what courage looks like," Mira said gently. Elena smiled, grateful for the friendship she had found within these walls, a friendship she never could have imagined possessing, back when she believed her only value lay in whatever use others could make of her. Here, surrounded by people who saw her as more than a bargaining tool, she was slowly beginning to remember who she truly was, independent of everyone else's expectations. As the sun set over the stronghold, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, Elena allowed herself a rare moment of genuine peace. Longer held the same power over her that it once had. She had faced him, spoken her truth, and walked away stronger for it. But peace, she would soon learn, rarely lasted long in a world still shadowed by the rogue faction that had once tried to use her as bait. Somewhere beyond the safety of the Ashford stronghold, Draven and his remaining followers were regrouping, and their thirst for revenge had not disappeared simply because their first plan had failed. Weeks passed, and life within the Ashford stronghold settled into something Elena had never expected to find again, after the betrayal that had brought her there. She learned the rhythms of the household, the names of the staff, the paths through the gardens that offered the most peaceful views of the surrounding hills. Slowly, carefully, this unfamiliar place began to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like something dangerously close to home. Ronan remained true to his promise, never pressuring her about the bond between them, though Elena noticed the way their conversations grew longer each evening, the way small touches, a hand on her shoulder, fingers brushing against hers, had become more frequent and less accidental. She found herself looking forward to his visits more than she cared to admit, found herself thinking about him, even during the quiet hours when he was occupied elsewhere with the duties of running his kingdom. One afternoon, Mira found her in the library, a rare quiet space within the busy stronghold, and settled into the chair across from her with a knowing look. "You have been smiling more lately," Mira observed. "Care to explain why?" Elena felt her cheeks warm slightly. "I do not know what you mean." "Elena," Mira said with a laugh, "I have known you for weeks now. I can tell when something has shifted. Elena closed the book she had been pretending to read and sighed. I think I am starting to understand what Ronan meant, about the bond between us. I feel it too now. This pull toward him that I cannot fully explain. And how does that make you feel? Mira asked gently. Terrified, Elena admitted honestly, and hopeful. Both at once, which does not make much sense. Mira reached over and squeezed her hand reassuringly. It makes perfect sense. You spent your whole life being controlled, being used by people who should have protected you instead. Of course, accepting something as significant as this bond feels frightening. But Elena, Ronan is nothing like the people who hurt you before. He has proven that again and again. Elena nodded slowly, knowing Mira spoke the truth, even as old fears whispered warnings in the back of her mind. Trust did not come easily to her anymore, but with each passing day, Ronan continued to earn it, patiently, consistently, without ever demanding anything in return. That evening, as the sun began to set, Elena found Ronan standing on one of the stronghold's balconies, overlooking the vast territory stretching out before them. She joined him quietly, and for a while, they simply stood together in comfortable silence, watching the colors shift across the sky. You seem thoughtful tonight, Ronan said eventually, glancing at her. I have been thinking about everything that has happened since that day in the forest, Elena said, about how much has changed in such a short time. Good changes, I hope, Ronan said, a hint of vulnerability in his voice that Elena rarely heard from him. Yes, she said honestly, good changes. Ronan turned to face her fully, his golden eyes searching her expression carefully. Elena, I know I promised not to pressure you about the bond between us, and I intend to keep that promise. But I need you to know something. Whatever you decide, whenever you decide it, I will still be here. This is not about convincing you to choose me. It is about making sure you know you have the freedom to choose at all. Elena's heart swelled with emotion at his words, the careful, patient way he continued to prioritize her comfort above his own desires. I know that, she said softly, and I am grateful for it, more than you realize. But, Ronan prompted gently, sensing there was more she wanted to say. Elena took a deep breath, gathering her courage. But I think I am ready to stop being afraid. I think I want to choose this, choose you, not because fate decided it for me, but because every day I spend here, I fall a little more in love with the person you actually are. Ronan went completely still, his golden eyes widening slightly with surprise, before something far warmer replaced it, an expression of such open, genuine joy that it took Elena's breath away. Elena, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Are you certain? I am, she said, and found that she truly meant it. I have spent so long being afraid of belonging to anyone, afraid that trusting someone would only lead to being hurt again. But you have shown me, every single day, that this bond is not about ownership or obligation. It is about choice, and I choose you, Ronan, freely, completely, on my own terms. Ronan reached up slowly, cupping her face gently in his hands, giving her every opportunity to step back if she wanted to. She did not. Instead, she leaned into his touch, closing the distance between them, until their lips met in a soft, tender kiss that felt like the culmination of everything they had built together over the past weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Ronan rested his forehead against hers, a small, genuine smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible, Elena Voss. I feel the same, Elena whispered, and for the first time since her father had led her into that forest, she felt entirely, completely certain about the direction her life was heading. They remained on the balcony for a long while, wrapped in the quiet joy of their newfound understanding, the vast territory stretching out beneath them under a sky now painted with stars. Elena allowed herself, finally, to imagine a future she had once thought impossible, a future built not on fear or obligation, but on genuine choice and mutual respect. But even as she allowed herself this rare moment of happiness, a shadow lingered at the edges of her thoughts, a quiet awareness that the danger from the forest had not truly disappeared. Draven and his remaining followers were still out there, and their humiliation at Ronan's hands had likely only deepened their desire for revenge. For now, though, Elena pushed those worries aside, choosing instead to remain present in this rare, precious moment of peace and happiness, unwilling to let fear steal away the joy she had fought so hard to find. The following morning, Elena woke with a lightness in her chest that had been missing for most of her life. She dressed quickly and made her way to the dining hall, where she found Mira already seated, a knowing smile spreading across her face the moment she saw Elena's expression. "Something happened," Mira said, not even bothering to hide her curiosity. "Tell me everything." Elena laughed, sitting down across from her friend, and found herself sharing the events of the previous evening with an openness that surprised even herself. Mira listened with evident delight, occasionally squeezing Elena's hand with genuine happiness for her. "I am so glad," Mira said once Elena had finished. "You deserve this happiness, Elena, after everything you have been through." "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. "For everything. For your friendship, especially. I do not know how I would have adjusted to all of this without you." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps, and Garrett appeared in the doorway, his expression tense in a way that immediately set Elena on edge. "Mira, Elena," he said, his voice urgent. "You need to come with me. There has been an incident at the eastern border." Elena's stomach dropped, the peace of the morning shattering instantly. "What kind of incident?" "Rogue activity," Garrett said grimly. "It looks like Draven's faction. They are regrouping, and this time, they are not alone." The dining hall fell silent as Garrett's words settled over them. Elena felt the warmth of the previous night fade quickly, replaced by a familiar, cold dread that she had hoped was behind her for good. "What do you mean, they are not alone?" Mira asked, rising quickly from her seat. "Scouts report Draven has joined forces with another rogue leader," Garrett said. "Someone named Silas Crane, who commands a much larger group from the Eastern Territories. Together, their numbers are significant. Ronan is already gathering his commanders." Elena's heart pounded as she followed Garrett and Mira toward the main hall, where Ronan stood surrounded by several of his most trusted warriors, studying a large map spread across a wooden table. His expression was serious, focused, every trace of the tenderness from the night before replaced by the sharp, commanding presence of a king preparing for conflict. He looked up as Elena entered, and for a brief moment, something softened in his eyes before the seriousness of the situation pulled his attention back. "Elena, I did not want you to hear about this from anyone but me." "I understand," Elena said, moving closer to the table. "What is happening?" "Draven survived our encounter in the forest, humiliated but alive," Ronan explained, pointing to a section of the map depicting the eastern border of his territory. "It seems that humiliation has driven him to seek out allies willing to help him extract revenge. Silas Crane commands a rogue faction, nearly 3 times the size of Draven's original group." "Revenge against who?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. Ronan's jaw tightened. "Against both of us, most likely. You escaped their trap, and I destroyed the men who tried to use you against me. They will want to correct both of those failures." A cold chill ran through Elena's body at the thought of facing Draven again, of becoming a target once more for men who saw her only as a tool to be used against someone more powerful. "What do we do?" "We prepare," Ronan said firmly. "I will not allow them anywhere near you, Elena. That much I can promise." Over the following days, the stronghold transformed around Elena, warriors training with renewed intensity, scouts sent out in every direction to track the movements of the combined rogue forces, and Ronan himself often absent for long hours as he coordinated defenses across his territory. Elena found herself feeling increasingly restless, unable to simply wait quietly while danger gathered on the horizon once again. "I want to help," she told Mira one evening, watching from a window as warriors trained below. "I cannot just sit here doing nothing while everyone else prepares to fight." "You are not a warrior, Elena," Mira said gently, though not unkindly. "There is no shame in that." "Maybe not," Elena said, "but I refuse to be helpless bait again. I want to learn to defend myself, at the very least." Mira studied her for a long moment, before nodding slowly. "I will speak to Garrett. Perhaps some basic training would ease your mind, even if you never need to use it." True to her word, Mira arranged for Elena to begin learning simple self-defense techniques under Garrett's careful instruction. Elena threw herself into the training, with a determination that surprised even her, pushing through sore muscles and frustrating mistakes, driven by a fierce refusal to ever again feel as powerless as she had in that forest clearing. Ronan found her one evening after a particularly difficult training session, sweat still clinging to her skin, her arms trembling from exertion. He watched her for a moment from the doorway before speaking. "Garrett tells me you have been working hard," he said, a note of pride evident in his voice. Elena wiped her brow, offering him a tired but genuine smile. "I refuse to be someone who needs saving every single time danger appears. I want to be able to protect myself, and maybe even help protect others." Ronan crossed the room and gently took her hands in his expression soft with admiration. "You continue to surprise me, Elena. Every single day." "Is that a good thing?" she asked, leaning into his touch. "It is an incredible thing," Ronan said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Just promise me you will be careful. I cannot lose you, not after everything we have built together." "I promise," Elena said softly, though privately, she knew that promise might prove difficult to keep, given the danger steadily approaching their borders. Meanwhile, tensions within the court continued to simmer beneath the surface. Priscilla, though outwardly cooperative during the preparations for potential conflict, still watched Elena with barely concealed disdain, and Elena often caught her whispering with other members of court, their conversations falling suspiciously silent whenever Elena drew near. "I do not trust her," Elena admitted to Mira one afternoon, watching Priscilla from across the training grounds. "There is something about the way she looks at me." "Priscilla has always resented anyone who gains Ronan's favor," Mira said with a sigh. She hoped, for a long time, that she might become his mate herself, though the bond never formed between them. "Your arrival, and the clear connection between you and Ronan, has been difficult for her to accept." Elena considered this information carefully, wondering if Priscilla's resentment ran deep enough to pose an actual threat, or if it was simply the harmless bitterness of unrequited hope. She decided to remain cautious regardless, unwilling to let her guard down completely within walls that, despite everything, had not yet earned her absolute trust. As the days passed, and reports of the combined rogue factions' movements grew increasingly concerning, Ronan called a meeting of his most trusted advisors, Elena included, to discuss their strategy moving forward. "Our scouts confirm Silas Crane's forces are moving steadily toward our eastern border," Ronan explained, gesturing toward the map now covered with markers indicating enemy positions. "Draven rides alongside him, eager for his chance at revenge. We estimate they will reach striking distance within the week." "What is our plan?" Garrett asked. "We reinforce the eastern defenses immediately," Ronan said, "but I also want additional protection specifically around the stronghold itself. If their true goal involves reaching Elena, I will not leave any vulnerability for them to exploit." Elena listened carefully, absorbing every detail of the strategy being formed around her, determined to understand fully what was coming, rather than remaining a passive observer to her own fate, as she had been forced to be so many times before. "I want to help with the defenses," she said, drawing surprised glances from several of the gathered warriors. "I have been training. I understand, I am not as skilled as any of you, but I refuse to simply hide while everyone else fights to protect this place." Ronan studied her for a long moment, clearly torn between his instinct to protect her completely and his growing respect for her determination and courage. "We will find a role for you," he said finally, "one that keeps you as safe as possible, while still allowing you to contribute. But Elena, if the fighting becomes too dangerous, you must trust my judgment and retreat to safety immediately." "I trust you," Elena said, and meant it completely. As the meeting concluded and preparations continued throughout the stronghold, Elena felt a strange mixture of fear and determination settling over her. The peace she had found over the past weeks, the growing love between herself and Ronan, all of it now stood threatened by a danger that refused to simply disappear. But she was no longer the same frightened girl who had been dragged into that forest clearing weeks ago. She had faced her father, found her voice, and begun building a new life for herself within these walls. Whatever Draven and Silas Crane intended, Elena refused to face it as helpless bait ever again. She would stand and fight for the life and love she had finally found, no matter what danger approached from the shadows beyond the borders of her new home. The days leading up to the expected arrival of Silas Crane's forces passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Elena spent her mornings training with Garrett, her afternoons helping coordinate supplies and communication between different sections of the stronghold, and her evenings with Ronan, treasuring the quiet moments they managed to steal amid the growing chaos. It was during one such evening, as they stood together reviewing updated reports from the Eastern Scouts, that a messenger burst into the room, breathless and alarmed. "My king," the messenger said, bowing quickly, "there has been a breach at the northern gate." Several intruders were spotted within the outer grounds. Ronan's expression hardened instantly. "How many?" "Unclear, my king. The guards are searching now, but whoever they are, they moved quickly and quietly." Ronan turned to Elena, concern flashing across his features. "Stay close to Garrett and Mira. I need to see this myself." "Let me come with you," Elena said immediately. "Elena, this could be dangerous." "I have been training for exactly this," she said firmly. "I am not going to hide while you face danger alone." Ronan studied her for a moment, clearly torn, before finally nodding. "Stay behind me. Do exactly as I say, without hesitation." Elena agreed, and together they made their way toward the northern gate, joined quickly by Garrett and several other warriors. The stronghold, usually so peaceful in the evening hours, now buzzed with tense activity, guards moving swiftly through the corridors and courtyards in search of the reported intruders. They found evidence of the breach near the outer wall, a section of fencing damaged and pushed aside, footprints leading toward the interior of the grounds. Ronan's expression grew increasingly grim as he studied the tracks. "This was not a simple scouting mission," he said quietly. "Whoever did this knew exactly where to look for weaknesses in our defenses." "You think it was Draven," Elena said, dread settling in her stomach. "I think it is possible," Ronan admitted, "which means we need to find them before they cause any real damage." They spread out to search the grounds, and Elena found herself walking alongside Mira through one of the quieter sections near the gardens, her heart pounding with every shadow that shifted in the darkness. She gripped the small blade Garrett had given her during training, grateful now for every lesson she had absorbed over the past days. A sudden rustle in the bushes ahead made both women freeze. Elena raised her blade instinctively, her training kicking in despite the fear coursing through her body. "Show yourself," Mira called out, her own weapon drawn. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, and Elena's blood ran cold as she recognized the scarred face immediately. "Draven." "Well," he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "It seems I found exactly what I was looking for." "You should not be here," Elena said, forcing steadiness into her voice despite the fear gripping her chest. "And yet here I am," Draven replied, taking a slow step closer. "I have thought about you often since our last meeting, Elena, about how close I came to a very profitable arrangement before your king interfered." Draven's eyes flicked toward Mira with mild amusement before returning to Elena. "I am not here for idle conversation. Silas wants the girl brought to him before the true battle begins. Consider this a preview of what is coming." Before either woman could react, Draven lunged forward with startling speed. Elena's training took over instinctively, and she twisted away from his grasp, striking out with the blade Garrett had trained her to use. The blow connected with Draven's arm, drawing a hiss of pain and surprise from him. "You have learned some new tricks," he snarled, though the wound seemed to only fuel his aggression rather than deter it. Mira moved quickly, positioning herself between Draven and Elena, engaging him directly, while shouting for reinforcements. The sound of the commotion echoed through the quiet gardens, and within moments, Elena heard the thunder of approaching footsteps as guards rushed toward their location. Draven, realizing he was now outnumbered and his element of surprise lost, retreated quickly into the shadows, disappearing back through the breach in the wall before anyone could stop him. Ronan arrived moments later, his expression a mixture of fury and fear as he took in the scene before him. "Elena, are you hurt?" "I am fine," Elena said, though her hands trembled slightly with the aftermath of adrenaline. "Draven was here. He said Silas wants me brought to him." Ronan's jaw clenched tightly, a low growl escaping him despite his obvious efforts to remain composed. This was a warning. "They wanted us to know they can reach you even within these walls." "But they could not take her," Garrett pointed out, arriving alongside several other warriors. Elena and Mira defended themselves well. Ronan turned to Elena, something between pride and terror flashing across his features. "You fought him off." "I did," Elena said, allowing herself a small measure of satisfaction, despite the lingering fear. The training worked. Ronan pulled her into his arms then, holding her tightly, his relief palpable. I am proud of you, more than words can express. But this cannot happen again. I need to reinforce every section of these walls immediately. Over the following hours, the entire stronghold mobilized, guards doubling their patrols, sections of damaged fencing repaired and reinforced, additional warriors stationed at every possible entry point. Ronan personally oversaw much of the reinforcement work, his focus absolute, his determination to protect Elena and everyone else within the stronghold unwavering. Later that night, once the immediate danger had passed and the grounds had been thoroughly secured, Elena sat with Ronan in his private study, still processing the events of the evening. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Mira had not been with me, she admitted quietly. But she was, Ronan said gently, taking her hand. And you fought bravely, Elena. You did not freeze, did not panic. You defended yourself exactly as you were trained to. It still terrified me, Elena confessed, seeing him again, remembering everything that happened in that forest. Ronan squeezed her hand reassuringly. That fear is natural, Elena. It does not diminish the courage you showed tonight. If anything, facing that fear and still fighting back makes your courage even more remarkable. Elena leaned into him, grateful for his steady presence amid the chaos of the evening. What happens now? With Silas and Draven planning something larger? Ronan's expression grew serious once more. We prepare for the possibility of a direct assault on the stronghold itself, rather than simply reinforcing the borders. If they are willing to breach our walls for a preview attack, they will not hesitate to attempt something far larger when the time comes. How much time do we have? Elena asked. Difficult to say precisely, Ronan admitted, but based on tonight's events, I suspect it will not be long. The weight of his words settled heavily over both of them. The fragile peace they had built together, now under direct threat from forces determined to tear it apart. Elena thought about everything she had gained since that day in the forest. The love she had found with Ronan, the friendship with Mira, the sense of belonging she had never expected to feel again after her father's betrayal. She refused to let Draven and Silas Crane take any of it away from her. Whatever happens, she said firmly, meeting Ronan's eyes with determination, I will not run from this fight. I have spent enough of my life being helpless. I refuse to be helpless now, when it matters most. Ronan studied her for a long moment, pride and love evident in his golden eyes. Then we will face this together, Elena. Whatever comes, we face it as one. Outside the study window, the moon hung high over the reinforced walls of the stronghold, casting silver light over grounds now bristling with additional guards and watchful eyes. Somewhere beyond those walls, Draven and Silas Crane continued gathering their forces, preparing for a confrontation that would soon test everything Elena and Ronan had built together. But within the walls themselves, despite the looming threat, a quiet strength had settled over the stronghold, a shared determination among everyone who called it home, to protect what they had built, no matter the cost. Elena fell asleep that night in Ronan's arms, exhausted from the events of the evening, but steadied by his presence beside her, ready to face whatever the coming days would bring. In the days following the breach at the northern gate, the stronghold transformed into something resembling a fortress under siege, even though the true attack had not yet arrived. Every entrance was reinforced, every guard doubled, and scouts reported constantly on the movements of the combined rogue forces gathering along the eastern border. Elena continued her training with renewed intensity, determined not to be caught unprepared again. Garrett noticed her dedication and began teaching her more advanced techniques, impressed by how quickly she absorbed each new lesson. You have natural instincts, he told her one afternoon, watching as she successfully defended against a series of practice attacks. Whatever fear you carry, you use it to sharpen your focus rather than letting it paralyze you. I refuse to be caught helpless again, Elena said simply, wiping sweat from her brow. That fear you mentioned, it drives me now instead of controlling me. Mira, watching from the sidelines, smiled with obvious pride. You have changed so much since you first arrived here, Elena. I barely recognized the frightened girl from that first day. I feel different, Elena admitted. Stronger. More certain of who I am, rather than who everyone else expects me to be. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of urgent horns echoing across the stronghold grounds, a signal Elena had learned meant approaching danger. Her heart immediately began racing as she exchanged alarmed glances with Mira and Garrett. "That is the warning signal," Garrett said grimly. "Something is happening at the border." They rushed toward the main hall, where Ronan already stood with his commanders, studying updated reports with intense focus. His expression was harder than Elena had ever seen it, every trace of gentleness replaced by the sharp focus of a leader preparing his people for battle. "Report," Ronan demanded, as Elena entered alongside Garrett and Mira. "Silas Crane's forces have crossed into our territory," one of the scouts reported breathlessly. "They move faster than anticipated. Current estimates place them within striking distance of the stronghold itself within the next 2 days." The room fell into tense silence as the full weight of this news settled over everyone present. 2 days. Far sooner than they had prepared for. "All warriors to their assigned positions immediately," Ronan commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority despite the underlying tension. "I want every section of our defenses reinforced and ready before nightfall tomorrow." As his commanders dispersed to carry out his orders, Ronan turned to Elena, his expression softening slightly despite the crisis unfolding around them. "Elena, I need you to understand something. This attack, if it comes as we fear, will be unlike anything we have faced before. Silas commands significant numbers, and Draven's personal vendetta against you makes this far more dangerous than a simple territorial dispute." "I understand," Elena said, meeting his gaze steadily. "What do you need from me?" Ronan hesitated for a moment before answering. "I need you to trust the plan we put in place. When the fighting begins, you will be positioned within the inner sanctuary, protected by our strongest warriors. I know you want to fight directly, but Elena, if something happened to you during this battle, I do not know how I would continue." Elena understood his fear, recognized the genuine love behind his protective instincts, but something within her rebelled against the idea of hiding, while others fought and potentially died defending her. "I hear you, Ronan, but I also cannot simply hide while everyone else risks everything. Let me help in whatever way makes sense, even if it is not on the front lines directly." After a long moment, Ronan nodded slowly. "There is one role that could genuinely help, if you are willing. Given our bond, and the growing sensitivity you have developed toward it, you might be able to sense danger before it becomes visible to our regular scouts. If you position yourself within the inner sanctuary, alongside our communication network, you could serve as an early warning system, alerting our forces to threats before they fully materialize." Elena considered this carefully, recognizing both the value and the responsibility such a role would carry. "I can do that." Over the following day, as the stronghold prepared for the coming battle, Elena worked closely with the communication team, familiarizing herself with the signals and systems she would need to relay warnings quickly and accurately. She also spent time with Ronan, whenever their schedules allowed, treasuring each stolen moment together as the threat of battle grew closer. That evening, as the sun set behind the fortified walls, Ronan found Elena standing alone, on the same balcony where they had first confirmed their feelings for each other weeks earlier. He joined her quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind, and for a moment, neither spoke, simply absorbing the comfort of each other's presence. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Ronan said softly, "I need you to know how much these past weeks with you have meant to me. Finding you, Elena, has been the greatest gift of my entire life." "Do not speak as though this is goodbye," Elena said, turning in his arms to face him directly. "We are going to get through this, together." "I intend to fight with everything I have to ensure that," Ronan said fiercely. "But I also need you to promise me something. If the battle turns against us, if our defenses fail, you will retreat immediately, without hesitation, regardless of what is happening to me or anyone else." Elena's chest tightened at the request, understanding the fear driving it, but hating the idea of abandoning him under any circumstances. "Ronan, I cannot promise that." "Elena, please," he said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. "I cannot fight at my best if I am worried about your safety above everything else. I need to know you will be safe, no matter what happens to me." Elena studied his face, seeing the genuine terror beneath his controlled exterior, and finally, reluctantly, nodded. "I promise to prioritize safety if things go badly. But Ronan, I also need you to promise me something in return. You fight to survive this, Not just to protect me or your kingdom, but because I need you in my future. Whatever future we manage to build together. Ronan pulled her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I promise, Elena. I will fight for us, for the future we deserve, together. They remained together on the balcony for a long while, watching the stars emerge across the darkening sky, treasuring this quiet moment before the storm that awaited them the following day. Elena felt fear, certainly, but beneath that fear, she also felt a fierce determination, a refusal to let Draven and Silas Crane destroy everything she and Ronan had built together. As the night deepened, warriors continued their preparations throughout the stronghold, the entire community coming together with unified purpose to defend their home and everyone within it. Elena watched from the balcony as torchlight flickered across the walls, as guards took their positions, as the entire fortress transformed into a bastion ready to withstand whatever assault came its way. Tomorrow would bring the true test of everything they had built, everything they had fought for since that day in the forest, when Ronan's arrival had changed the entire trajectory of Elena's life. She refused to let fear overshadow the strength she had discovered within herself over these past weeks. Whatever came with the dawn, Elena intended to face it with courage, determined to protect not only herself, but the future she had finally allowed herself to hope for once again. Dawn broke over the Ashford stronghold with an eerie stillness, the kind of quiet that Elena had come to associate with the calm before something terrible. She stood within the inner sanctuary, surrounded by the communication team, her senses stretched taut as she tried to focus on the subtle pull of the bond connecting her to Ronan, searching for any hint of the danger she knew was approaching. "Anything yet?" asked one of the communication officers, a young woman named Bridget who had been assigned to work alongside her. "Not yet," Elena said, closing her eyes and concentrating harder. "But I can feel something building, a tension, growing stronger." Word came shortly after that the scouts had spotted Silas Crane's forces approaching from the eastern hills, their numbers even larger than initial estimates had suggested. Elena's heart pounded as reports continued flowing in, painting an increasingly grim picture of the battle about to unfold. Ronan appeared briefly within the sanctuary, dressed for battle, his expression fierce with focused determination. He crossed the room quickly and pulled Elena into a brief, fierce embrace. "They are here," he said quietly. "Stay safe. Trust the bond, and trust yourself." "Be careful," Elena said, fighting back tears as she memorized every detail of his face. "Come back to me. Always," Ronan promised, before turning and striding out to join his warriors at the walls. The following hours passed in a blur of tension and fear, as reports flooded into the sanctuary, describing the initial clashes at the outer defenses. Elena focused every ounce of her attention on the bond connecting her to Ronan, trying to sense any change that might indicate danger beyond what the scouts could see directly. Suddenly, a sharp, urgent feeling shot through her, a warning that something was wrong, something the visible reports had not yet captured. "Wait," she said, standing abruptly. "Something is happening on the western side. I can feel it." Bridget looked at her with surprise. "Our reports show the main assault focused entirely on the eastern wall." "I know what the reports say," Elena insisted, "but I am telling you, something is happening on the western side. Please, send scouts to check immediately." Despite some hesitation, Bridget relayed the message, and within minutes, confirmation came back that a smaller group of rogues had indeed attempted to breach the western wall as a diversion, exactly where the defenses were thinnest due to the focus on the eastern assault. Thanks to Elena's warning, reinforcements arrived in time to repel the attempted breach, before any real damage could occur. "How did you know?" Bridget asked, staring at Elena with newfound respect. "The bond," Elena said simply. "I could feel Ronan's awareness shift, his concern growing about something beyond what the scouts had reported." Word of Elena's warning spread quickly through the command structure, and from that point forward, her insights were treated with far greater urgency and respect. She continued monitoring the bond throughout the battle, providing crucial warnings that helped Ronan's forces anticipate and counter several additional tactics employed by the combined rogue faction. As the day wore on, the battle grew increasingly intense, and Elena's connection to Ronan through the bond began to reveal not just tactical information, but also glimpses of the physical and emotional toll the fighting was taking on him. She felt his exhaustion, his frustration as the enemy proved more resilient than anticipated, and beneath it all, a fierce determination to protect everyone within his territory, especially her. In the late afternoon, a particularly urgent feeling gripped her, sharp and alarming, unlike anything she had felt throughout the earlier hours of fighting. "Something is wrong," she said, gripping the edge of the table for support. "Ronan is in danger. Direct danger." "What kind of danger?" Garrett asked, having returned briefly to check on the sanctuary's status. "I do not know exactly," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly. "But it feels close, immediate." Garrett's expression turned grim. "I need to get back to the front lines." "I am coming with you," Elena said firmly. "Elena, you promised." "I promised to prioritize safety if things went badly for everyone," Elena interrupted. "This is different. Ronan needs help, and I might be the only one who can sense exactly where." Garrett studied her for a moment, clearly torn, before finally relenting. "Stay close to me. The moment I say retreat, you retreat. No arguments." Elena agreed, and together they made their way toward the eastern wall, the sounds of battle growing louder with every step. The scene that greeted them upon arrival was chaotic, warriors locked in fierce combat across the fortified grounds, the air thick with tension, and the sharp scent of exertion and fear. Elena's senses, sharpened by the bond, guided her instinctively toward a section of the wall where the fighting seemed particularly intense. There, she spotted Ronan, engaged in direct combat with a figure she recognized immediately despite the chaos surrounding them. Draven. The two men fought with fierce intensity, and Elena watched in horror as Draven, seemingly having learned from their previous encounters, fought with a calculated viciousness, clearly aimed at exploiting whatever weaknesses he could find. Ronan, though clearly the stronger fighter, showed signs of exhaustion from hours of continuous battle, and Elena's heart clenched with fear as she watched Draven land a solid strike against him. "Ronan!" she cried out instinctively, unable to stop herself. The sound of her voice seemed to reach him even amid the chaos, and Ronan's eyes flickered toward her for just a moment. A mistake that Draven immediately tried to exploit, lunging forward to capitalize on the brief distraction. But that momentary distraction worked both ways. Seeing Elena present at the battle, seeing the fierce protectiveness that flooded Ronan's expression, seemed to reignite something within him, a renewed determination that pushed past his exhaustion. He twisted away from Draven's attack with surprising speed, countering with a powerful strike that finally brought the rogue leader down. Draven collapsed to the ground, defeated, and Ronan stood over him, breathing heavily but victorious. The surrounding warriors, having witnessed their leader's decisive victory, seemed to draw renewed strength and determination, pushing back against the remaining rogue forces with fresh intensity. Elena rushed forward, unable to stay back any longer, relief and fear mixing together as she reached Ronan's side. "You are hurt," she said, noticing the injuries he had sustained during the fight. "I will be fine," Ronan said, though his voice carried obvious exhaustion. "You should not be here, Elena." "I felt something was wrong," she explained quickly. "I could sense you were in danger." Ronan's expression softened, despite the chaos still surrounding them. "The bond led you here." "It did," Elena confirmed. "And it seems it arrived just in time." Around them, the tide of battle continued shifting increasingly, in favor of Ronan's forces, the defeat of Draven seeming to break something within the coordination of the remaining rogue faction. Reports soon confirmed that Silas Crane, seeing his primary ally defeated and his forces beginning to falter, had ordered a retreat, unwilling to risk further losses against defenses that had proven far more resilient than anticipated. As the sounds of battle gradually faded, replaced by the exhausted cheers of Ronan's victorious warriors, Elena finally allowed herself to process the full weight of everything that had happened. They had survived. Ronan had survived. And through the strength of the bond between them, she had played a crucial role in ensuring that victory. Ronan pulled her close, despite his obvious exhaustion, holding her tightly, as the reality of their survival settled over both of them. "You saved my life today, Elena. Your warning, your presence here, it made all the difference." "We saved each other," Elena said softly, tears of relief finally spilling down her cheeks. "That is what this bond means, is it not? We are stronger together than we ever could be apart." As the sun began to set over the battle-worn stronghold, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Elena stood beside Ronan amid the aftermath of their hard-won victory, feeling not just relief, but a profound sense of belonging that she had never expected to find again after the betrayal that had once threatened to destroy her entirely. The threat that had loomed over them for weeks had finally been defeated, but more than that, Elena had proven to herself, and to everyone around her, that she was no longer the helpless girl who had once been sold as bait in a forest clearing. She had become something far stronger, a woman capable of fighting for her own future, capable of protecting the people she loved with everything she had. Whatever challenges still awaited them, Elena faced the future now with confidence rather than fear, secure in the knowledge that she and Ronan would face whatever came next together, bound not just by fate, but by a love and partnership they had both chosen freely, again and again, through every trial that had tested them. In the days following the battle, the Ashford stronghold slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, though the marks of conflict remained visible in repaired walls, and the quiet exhaustion still evident among the warriors who had fought so fiercely to defend their home. Draven, defeated and captured, was held under close guard, awaiting judgment for his crimes, while reports confirmed that Silas Crane's remaining forces had scattered entirely, no longer posing any organized threat to the territory. Elena spent those recovery days helping wherever she could, tending to minor injuries alongside the healers, offering comfort to those who had lost friends or family during the fighting, and slowly processing the enormity of everything that had happened since her father first led her into that forest so many weeks ago. Her father's fate, she learned, had been decided independently of her own involvement, the debts and dishonesty that had led him to sell his own daughter finally catching up with him through the judgment of his own pack leaders. Elena felt a complicated mixture of emotions upon hearing the news, grief for the relationship she had never truly had, but also a quiet sense of closure, knowing that his actions had finally been held accountable, regardless of her own choice not to intervene on his behalf. One afternoon, as she sat with Mira in the garden, enjoying a rare moment of peaceful sunshine, Ronan approached them with an expression Elena had not seen before, a mixture of nervousness and excitement that seemed unusual for a man normally so composed. "Elena," he said, "might I speak with you privately?" Mira, sensing something significant was about to happen, offered a knowing smile and excused herself quickly, leaving the two of them alone in the quiet garden. "Is everything all right?" Elena asked, noting his obvious nervousness. "Everything is more than all right," Ronan said, taking her hands gently in his. "Elena, these past weeks with you, from that first terrifying moment in the forest, to everything we have faced and overcome together since, have changed my entire understanding of what happiness truly means." Elena felt her heart begin to race, sensing the significance building in his words. "Ronan, what are you saying?" He knelt before her then, still holding her hands, his golden eyes filled with a vulnerability she had rarely seen from him. "I am saying that I love you, Elena, completely and without reservation. You arrived in my life as someone who needed protection, but you have shown me, time and again, that you possess a strength and courage that continues to inspire me every single day. I do not simply want you as my fated mate because destiny decided it. I want you because I choose you, fully and completely, for exactly who you are." Tears filled Elena's eyes as she listened, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in his words. "Ronan." "Elena Voss," he continued, his voice steady, despite the emotion evident beneath it. "Will you accept the mate bond between us, not out of obligation or fate, but out of genuine, mutual love and choice? Will you become my Luna, ruling beside me as an equal partner, for as long as we both shall live?" Elena felt the weight of everything she had endured settle into place around this singular, perfect moment, every hardship, every fear, every small step of courage that had brought her here, to this garden, kneeling before a man who loved her not for what she could offer him, but simply for who she truly was. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Ronan, I choose you, completely, freely, and forever." Ronan rose immediately, pulling her into his arms, and they shared a kiss, filled with all the love and relief and joy that had built between them since that fateful day in the forest. When they finally parted, both were laughing through their tears, overwhelmed by the happiness of the moment. News of their engagement spread quickly through the stronghold, and preparations began almost immediately for a ceremony that would formally recognize Elena as Ronan's Luna, a celebration that the entire territory eagerly anticipated after the difficult weeks of conflict they had all endured together. The ceremony itself took place beneath a clear sky, the entire courtyard filled with members of the court, warriors who had fought bravely during the battle, and ordinary citizens from across the Ashford territory, who had come to witness the joining of their king with the woman who had already proven herself worthy of standing beside him. Elena wore a simple, elegant gown, her hair adorned with flowers, from the very gardens where Ronan had proposed, and as she walked toward him through the gathered crowd, she felt none of the fear or uncertainty that had once defined so much of her life. Instead, she felt only love, gratitude, and a fierce, unwavering confidence in the future she had chosen for herself. Mira stood nearby, tears of happiness streaming down her face, while Garrett watched with evident pride, having witnessed firsthand the incredible strength Elena had demonstrated throughout the recent conflict. Even Priscilla, present among the gathered court, seemed to have finally accepted the genuine bond between Elena and Ronan, offering a small, if somewhat reserved, smile as the ceremony proceeded. When Ronan finally placed the traditional mark of the Luna upon her, symbolizing her official recognition as his equal partner and the future leader of the Ashford territory alongside him, a great cheer rose from the assembled crowd, echoing across the stronghold grounds and out into the surrounding hills. From this day forward, Ronan announced to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, Elena stands beside me, not as someone who required rescue, but as a woman who has proven her strength, her courage, and her unwavering commitment to this territory and its people. She is my equal in every sense, and I could not be more honored to call her my Luna. Elena felt overwhelmed by the love and acceptance surrounding her, a stark contrast to the betrayal and fear that had once defined her existence. The girl who had been sold as bait in a forest clearing, discarded by her own family without a second thought, now stood as the honored partner of the most powerful king in the Northern Territories, celebrated and respected by everyone who had witnessed her journey. As the celebration continued into the evening, filled with music and laughter, and the warm glow of countless torches lighting the courtyard, Elena found a quiet moment to step aside with Ronan, the two of them watching the joyful gathering from a slightly secluded corner of the grounds. "Can you believe this is our life now?" Elena asked softly, leaning against him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I believe it completely," Ronan said, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. "Though I will admit, the day I found you in that forest, I never imagined it would lead to something so perfect." "Neither did I," Elena admitted. "I thought my life was over that day. Instead, it was only beginning." They stood together in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the celebration unfold before them, grateful for everything they had overcome to reach this moment of genuine happiness and belonging. The threats that had once loomed over them, Draven, Silas Crane, even the betrayal of Elena's own father, had all been faced and overcome, leaving behind only the strong, unbreakable bond between two people who had chosen each other freely, completely, and forever. As the stars emerged fully across the night sky, above the Ashford stronghold, Elena allowed herself, finally and completely, to embrace the future stretching out before her, no longer defined by fear or betrayal, but by love, strength, and the unwavering knowledge that she had found exactly where she belonged. The girl who had once been sold as bait now stood as Luna of the Ashford territory, protected not because she was weak, but honored because she had proven, time and again, just how strong she truly was. And beside her, King Ronan Ashford, the Alpha King who had appeared at exactly the right moment to change the entire course of her life, stood ready to build a future together, one where every choice, every challenge, and every triumph would belong to both of them, equally and completely, for the rest of their lives.